Good evening. Our top story tonight, the wide receivers across the NFL, which rookies are actually starting. We've heard lots of chatter of who thinks they've won a starting job, who will start week one, but what is the truth? What is a lie? We are here to cover it all on Player Profiler Today. By my count, there are already 7 wide receivers that are starting as rookies. And it's early. It is early in the offseason. So this number could climb with some camp breakouts, with some training camp performers. We know all of this buzz, this rookie hype never ends. But for now, the 7 wide receivers that are already starting for their teams. Number 1 is, of course, Jaxon Smith-Njigba. We know that. It's obvious. Jaxon Smith-Njigba would have started for the Seahawks last year were he on the roster. He would have easily beat out Marquise Goodwin to be the wide receiver 3. It is no competition between Jaxon Smith-Njigba and Dwayne Eskridge. That is not a conversation in the slightest. It doesn't matter. JSN, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. Those will be the 3 wide receiver sets for the entirety of the season. And at some point, maybe not in 2023, I believe by the end of the season, but at some point, Jaxon Smith-Njigba is going to leapfrog Tyler Lockett on the depth chart. He's going to be the wide receiver 2. When they go 2 tight ends, it's going to be Jaxon Smith-Njigba on one side, and it's going to be DK Metcalf on the other. I believe that will happen by the end of the season, but I could be wrong. But 2024, 2025, at some point, Jaxon Smith-Njigba is also going to pass DK Metcalf. Yes, Jaxon Smith-Njigba will become the wide receiver 1 for the Seattle Seahawks. I believe it'll happen in 2024, but entering 2025, at the latest, it will be Jaxon Smith-Njigba, wide receiver 1 in Seattle. But for now, he is one of the starting 3, as is the player that was drafted directly after him in Quentin Johnston. Now, there is some controversy. There is some conversation because Quentin Johnston is the one who announced that he had won a starting role at the Chargers early in training camp, early in practices, early in the offseason. He was given the wide receiver 3 job. And now that's very possible, but it seems more likely that while Josh Palmer was not practicing, Quentin Johnston was the obvious wide receiver 3. And so maybe Quentin Johnston is just projecting a little bit, seeing, hey, well, I'm the wide receiver 3 right now. I must have won the job. Go me. But that's not a guarantee because Josh Palmer was not practicing. So there's a chance that Quentin Johnston and Josh Palmer rotate as the 3rd wide receiver. Josh Palmer, obviously more familiar with Justin Herbert, but the Chargers did draft Quentin Johnston to start eventually. They're going to give him every opportunity to start. And whether or not he was telling the truth that he's already won the job, if he's saying that, he's obviously pretty confident that it's going to happen sooner rather than later. And it very well could have already happened. This could be the truth. I'm just saying it's not guaranteed that Quentin Johnston actually beat Josh Palmer out. There's a chance that Quentin Johnston is just assuming. Because Jalen Guyton, he's still rehabbing too. Obviously, Jalen Guyton, not a threat for Quentin Johnston, John Hightower, all these wide receivers, not a threat. It's Josh Palmer and it's Quentin Johnston. But Quentin says it's his job. And if you want to know more about Quentin Johnston, if you want to know more about Jaxon Smith-Njigba, there is one place for all the information your heart desires, and that is the world-famous Draft Kit.
Hey, it's the Podfather of great news. The 2023 Draft Kit is live. It is world famous. Why? Because it is the best resource for winning fantasy football championships that exists. There are rankings and cheat sheets for every format you can imagine. We have projections both at the team level and the player level. And wherever you are, you can click on a player open them up and see in-depth written analysis about what to expect in fantasy football from that player this year. And then you can click on the team and you can get even more in-depth analysis, all the drivers of fantasy production, both in a positive and negative direction for that team, including a signature trend. And the graphics are incredible. So these team insights, they give you the team level projections, the vacated targets, the vacated ARs, and that one dynamic for each team that you need to know when making decisions on draft day. And we added a bunch of features. I mean, individual cheat sheets for Theo and Billy and Dario. So you could take your favorite analyst and download their personal draft cheat sheet. And then in the commissioners section, also brand new this year, Memphis Young lays out everything you need to know to manage a league, do's, don'ts, tips, and what the more innovative fantasy commissioners are doing this year. That's presented by Trophy Smack. The whole package is presented by the Fantasy Football Players Championship, the FFPC, Ray Garvin, Derek Brown, the best minds in the industry contributing analysis. It's certainly not the most inexpensive draft kit on the market, but it is the best. PlayerProfiler.com/draft kit. PlayerProfiler.com/draft kit. Go get it.
Go and get the draft kit and dive into Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers drafted right after Quentin Johnston, and Zay Flowers is already a starting wide receiver. He might be the wide receiver 3, but he could be the wide receiver 1. Because right now, or at least in minicamp, in organized team activities, Zay Flowers and Nelson Aguilar were the top 2 wide receivers. We all remember that Rashad Bateman, he had the cortisone injection in his foot. It's a little bit scary. We'll see what happens come training camp. But no Rashad Bateman, and Odell Beckham didn't practice at all to start OTAs, and then come minicamp, he started to work his way into the offense, but he was still just a rotational piece. Either way, Zay Flowers was able to gobble up those reps in 2 wide receiver sets. And when Rashad Bateman and Odell Beckham come back, there's a chance that he's the wide receiver 3, but it's probably more likely that Zay Flowers ends up leading the Baltimore Ravens in wide receiver snaps. Rashad Bateman has the foot that is currently bothering him. So the Ravens would be wise to, even if he's not injured, even if he's not missing games, to dial his snaps back just a little bit. Same with Odell Beckham. Odell Beckham shouldn't be playing every snap at this point in his NFL career. He doesn't need to. Odell Beckham can take some snaps off. Zay Flowers can lead the Ravens in snaps. Nelson Aguilar also gives them a body when they need to rest Rashad Bateman and Odell Beckham, just to give them that little bit of extra break. So Zay Flowers could be the wide receiver 3, at least the wide receiver 2 more than likely, and good chance that Zay Flowers leads the Ravens in routes run in 2023, aside from Mark Andrews, of course, the real wide receiver 1 for the Baltimore Ravens. And then Jordan Addison. Jordan Addison was drafted to start day 1. It gets Jalen Reagor off the field and onto the bench as the wide receiver 4-5. And instead, it's Jordan Addison versus KJ Osborne to be the wide receiver 2. Now, Jordan Addison did miss a bunch of time during minicamps, but when he was on the field to start, he was electric. Jordan Addison is going to be the wide receiver 2. If not week 1, week 3. He's that damn good, and Jordan Addison is going to be second on the Vikings in targets. He's going to out-target TJ Hawkinson. Jordan Addison is the real deal. And it's not just the first-round receivers that are already starting. Jayden Reed has locked up a job as the 3rd wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers. He is the starting slot receiver. And I'm not going to be surprised at all when he ends up as the wide receiver 2 ahead of Romeo Doubs. Remember, Romeo Doubs was a day 3 pick. Romeo Doubs wasn't particularly good last year. He wasn't efficient. His PFF grade was bad. He wasn't good. And then they go out and draft Jayden Reed in round 2. They spend more draft capital on Jayden Reed than they spent on Romeo Doubs. He is already working with the first team. He is taking reps on the outside. Jayden Reed will be the wide receiver 2 sooner rather than later, but he is already starting. He is already the Green Bay Packers starting slot receiver. And Josh Downs is probably the starting slot receiver for the Indianapolis Colts. Now, he does have to beat out Isaiah McKenzie, who is that perennial wide receiver 3-4. Josh Downs is going to take the job from Isaiah McKenzie early. And again, much like Jaden Reed, Josh Downs is a better wide receiver than Alec Pierce. Now, Alec Pierce, he was a second-round pick. We thought he went too early, but he did get that day 2 draft capital. But Josh Downs is just better. He is a better route runner, better producer. Josh Downs is going to be the wide receiver 2 in production for the Indianapolis Colts, but because of the size of Alec Pierce, it's going to be tough for him to leapfrog Alec Pierce in snaps, because in 2 wide receiver sets, there's still plenty of blocking snaps that happen. And so the Colts very well could decide, hey, let's keep Alec Pierce on the field over Josh Downs in 2 wide receiver sets, because yeah, he's a downgrade as a receiver, but what he does allow us to do also opens up some other things. We can run some plays that we can't run with Josh Downs. So these are the things to think about, and these are the reasons why I'm not particularly big on Josh Downs in Dynasty, because even when he becomes the wide receiver 2, when he does pass Alec Pierce, he's still going to be in a low volume offense with Anthony Richardson. Michael Pittman is still going to be the alpha, but it is an accomplishment that Josh Downs is already starting for the Indianapolis Colts. And the final wide receiver, the 7th wide receiver that is going to be starting in week 1, is Michael Wilson, the wide receiver for the Arizona Cardinals, drafted in the 3rd round. He is the prototypical X receiver. He can beat one-on-one coverage. He can handle corners in press man. He has the size, he has the athleticism, and he has the route running that Michael Wilson is going to be starting in 3 wide receiver sets early in his career. He's going to have to beat out Greg Dortch, and Greg Dortch showed last year that when on the field, he's pretty damn productive. And we believe targets are a skill. Greg Dortch commanded targets. But it is a less than ideal starting lineup when you have the 5'10 Hollywood Brown as your wide receiver 1, forced to play X on the line of scrimmage. And then in the slot, you've got Greg Dortch, who is 5'9" and slow, though he is productive. And at Z, you've got the 5'7" Rondale Moore. That is not an ideal pass catching core, though it would be great for Trey McBride in the red zone. He's going to eat there if that were the case. It's not a good looking lineup. And so Michael Wilson, he might not be on Greg Dortch's level yet. The ability to command targets and win might not be there yet. But what this actually allows the offense to do, allows Michael Wilson to play on the line of scrimmage at X. It frees Hollywood Brown up to play off the line of scrimmage as the Z. He can be going deep. He can be put in motion. That is the role that Hollywood needs to play. And then you get Rondale Moore in his natural slot position. He is miscast when he is moved outside at Z. He can do it. And in football sense, it makes sense. He's got the speed. It opens up things underneath, but it is not the ideal usage of his talents. Rondale Moore better in the slot. And that is why Michael Wilson should and will start. Then we get to the top backups, but there is one final player that actually, he's starting now. He's working with the first team, but it's because of injuries. And this player is Trey Palmer, 6th round draft pick out of the University of Nebraska, transferred from LSU, total dog, learned how to be a pro from Jamar Chase, a Juju, or not Juju Smith-Schuster, a Justin Jefferson, a Terrace Marshall, all these guys. Kayshon Boutte, who also saw himself drafted real late. We'll get to him in a little bit, but Trey Palmer, already working with the first team offense of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Russell Gage was not practicing, which means Trey Palmer was operating as that Z. And honestly, Trey Palmer probably a better fit for this offense than Russell Gage is. We've got Mike Evans. Mike Evans is the DK Metcalf in this Dave Canales Seattle Seahawks knockoff offense. And then we've got Chris Godwin. And Chris Godwin is Chris Godwin's kind of both. He can be the Tyler Lockett or he can be the Jaxon Smith-Njigba in the slot. We've seen him more in the slot. Russell Gage can do that job too, but so can Trey Palmer. And then if we are counting Chris Godwin as the Jaxon Smith-Njigba in the slot, then Trey Palmer is a lot closer to Tyler Lockett than Russell Gage. Russell Gage does not have that top end speed to take the top off of defenses that Trey Palmer has, that Tyler Lockett has. And so, while Trey Palmer might not be an official starter week 1, he's going to see some rotational reps early on. And that is the last wide receiver that is kind of a starter, currently a top backup, but in the starting mix. Now, the current top backups, Jonatahn Mingo. Jonatahn Mingo has a chance to win the wide receiver 1 job, but as things stand today, right now, Jonatahn Mingo is the wide receiver 4. He is behind DJ Chark. He is behind Terrace Marshall. He is behind Adam Thielen, and that is okay. Jonatahn Mingo, though, could pass DJ Chark. He could pass Terrace Marshall. Probably not going to pass Adam Thielen. They gave Adam Thielen all that money. Adam Thielen's going to be the slot receiver too. But as things stand right now, Jonatahn Mingo is going to have to work his way onto the field. It's going to be possible. Terrace Marshall is being inconsistent, which has opened the door. But for now, Jonatahn Mingo's not going to see the field a whole lot. He's going to be the 4th wide receiver, as is Mavin Mims and Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice isn't going to be starting week 1. Unless there's an injury, of course, which is very possible with Kadarius Toney. But the current offense of the Kansas City Chiefs, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, he plays that stretch X role. He plays on the line of scrimmage, runs those wind sprints for the Kansas City Chiefs. Kadarius Toney can play in the slot. He can play out wide at Z. He can play off the line of scrimmage. Kadarius Toney, you can move him around. The same with Sky Moore. Sky Moore can play wide. He can play in the slot. Whatever you need him to. Now, Rashee Rice, he compares better physically to Juju Smith-Schuster. And last year, Juju Smith-Schuster was the one in the slot. But who's to say that Rashee Rice is going to beat out Sky Moore, who was also a 2nd-round pick, who we all loved last year, and has an extra year in the offense, learning the system. And then Kadarius Toney. We've heard Kadarius Toney is the wide receiver 1 for the Kansas City Chiefs. I feel it's more likely that Marquez Valdes-Scantling will be the wide receiver 1 in snaps. Kadarius Toney will be out targeting him, absolutely. But Rashee Rice is going to start the season as a backup, and there's no guarantee that he even beats out Richie James. Richie James is the model of consistency. He is the definition of reliable. So Rashee Rice might end up starting the season as the wide receiver 5, just like Mavin Mims. Mavin Mims, he is behind Jerry Jeudy. He is behind Courtland Sutton. He is behind Tim Patrick. Tim Patrick has had praise as the best wide receiver that the Denver Broncos have as an all-around football player. Possible that Mavin Mims struggles to beat out KJ Hamler, who's been there, or Marquez Callaway, brought over from the New Orleans Saints along with Sean Payton. What if he starts the year as the wide receiver 4 because he knows the role, and Mavin Mims starts as just the punt returner? I believe Mavin Mims one day will be the wide receiver 1 for the Denver Broncos, but that's not going to be this year. He's going to be a backup. And the same could be said for Tank Dell and Xavier Hutchinson. They could be the wide receiver 1. Tank Dell could become the target hog in the slot week 1 for CJ Stroud. It's possible. But it's also possible that Nico Collins is out wide at X. Robert Woods is Z, and John Mechie's the slot receiver. Though he didn't play last year, though he didn't practice with the team, he has an extra year learning the offense. So what if John Mechie gets the nod early? And what if Xavier Hutchinson, 6th-round draft pick, what if he ends up showing out? All the guy does is score touchdowns. What if Xavier Hutchinson ends up leapfrogging Nico Collins, leapfrogging Robert Woods? This is a wide open depth chart for the Houston Texans. As things stand now, Tank Dell and Xavier Hutchinson are backups, but they could climb pretty quickly. As for the rest of the true backup, Cedric Tillman is a true backup for the Cleveland Browns. He is going to be the one-for-one replacement for Donovan Peoples-Jones. DPJ will start the year. The job will be his as long as he holds on to it. But Cedric Tillman was drafted to replace Donovan Peoples-Jones when he leaves in free agency next year. But for now, he is just a top backup. Same with Trey Tucker for the Las Vegas Raiders. He is a more natural fit as a Z receiver than Hunter Renfrow. Hunter Renfrow is going to be miscast in this Raiders offense. We've got Devontae Adams. He's the wide receiver one. They signed Jacoby Myers to play the slot. And so putting Hunter Renfrow out wide in a Z position, which is typically a field stretching position, that doesn't really make sense for Hunter Renfrow. Naturally, Trey Tucker fits that position better, but he's not going to be starting over Hunter Renfrow. That's just not something that's going to happen. So he'll need a trade to become an actual part of this offense. And same with Tyler Scott. Tyler Scott is the one-for-one backup to Darnell Mooney. He can stretch the field. He can go in motion, do some of those gadgety things. And he could probably play in the slot too. He is also the one-for-one backup to Chase Claypool, the starting slot receiver. But at the same time, he might not even be the true first off the bench because Equanimous St. Brown re-signed. They love his blocking. He's that kind of guy that just sees snaps. So Tyler Scott with the Chicago Bears, we're a fan. We hope that he can develop long-term. Maybe he can be the replacement for Darnell Mooney if he walks in free agency next year. But for now, he's just a true backup. And Puka Nacua, the final true backup, where if anything happens, he slots right in. Because if Cooper Kupp goes down, Puka Nacua can slide right in the slot. If Ben Skowronek doesn't work out as X receiver, well, Puka Nacua can play X as well. And if Van Jefferson doesn't work as the Z or he goes down, Puka Nacua can play that position as well. Puka Nacua can do anything the Rams need him to. They don't want him to start. They actually want him to be behind Tutu Atwell too. But Puka Nacua, for now, he's a backup. Could be in the starting lineup at some point. And then there's a lot of depth. There is some depth that we got excited about. Jalin Hyatt isn't a top backup. He's a depth piece. He is going to struggle to see the field. Isaiah Hodgins is starting. Paris Campbell starting. Darius Slayton starting. But then once they see the return of Sterling Shepard, Jalin Hyatt's not going to be playing over Sterling Shepard. Once they see the return of Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalin Hyatt's not going to be playing over Wan'Dale Robinson. So just a pure depth piece for Jalin Hyatt. Charlie Jones, same thing. He could be the wide receiver for, he could be the top slot receiver behind Tyler Boyd, or he could be behind Trent Taylor, Trent Irwin. He's going to struggle to see the field without an injury. Justin Shorter for the Buffalo Bills, same thing. There is just a lot of players at wide receiver in this class that aren't going to make a difference in 2023. Darius Davis, he's a special teamer for the Los Angeles Chargers. He's not going to make an impact on the offense. Dontavian Wicks, maybe. Maybe Dontavian Wicks beats out Romeo Doubs. That's something that could happen. But Parker Washington, he's not seeing the field for the Jags. Kayshon Boutte might not even make the team for the New England Patriots. Same with Demario Douglas. Those two are possibly competing for one roster spot. A.T. Perry's not going to make a difference for the Saints. Antoine Green isn't going to see the field for the Lions. Colton Dowell. Yeah, Colton Dowell was drafted. You probably don't remember, but he was. He's not seeing the field for the Titans, even though their depth chart is completely bare. Grant DeBose, he's not going to see the field for the Packers because he is a slot-only receiver, and Jaden Reed is the starting slot. And behind him, you probably have... Anyways, Grant DeBose, doesn't matter. Ronnie Bell might have been the worst wide receiver pick in this draft for the San Francisco 49ers. He's not going to see the field this year. Ronnie Bell is never going to see the field for the San Francisco 49ers. It's just not going to happen. And so I know it's fun to get excited about wide receivers. It's fun to get excited about all the shiny new toys. And it's pretty great that we've already got 7 wide receivers starting, and we've also got Puka Nacua and Trey Palmer that could mix in. And it's fun that Jonathan Mingo, Rashee Rice, Mavin Mims, that they could end up starting at some point. Tank Dell, Xavier Hutchinson, same thing. You're going to be disappointed if you rely heavily on any of these wide receivers that haven't already locked up a job.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.